Have you ever experienced moments when your body warns warnings that something feels amiss, yet the source remains frustratingly elusive? Perhaps there are mornings when you wake with an inexplicable heaviness in your temples, afternoons when your stomach churns without obvious cause. Maybe you've noticed a persistent wariness that clings to you despite adequate rest, or a general malaise that defies explanation. These mysterious symptoms often lead us to examine our external circumstances, our demanding schedules, our dietary choices, exercise routines, or environmental factors. However, the authentic origin of these physical manifestations frequently resides in a realm we tend to overlook: the vast landscape of our inner emotional world. The human experience is inherently complex, weaving together the physical and emotional aspects of our existence in ways that are far more interconnected than we typically acknowledge. Our bodies and minds engage in constant dialogue, communicating through channels that operate beneath our conscious awareness. When we choose to silence one half of this conversation by suppressing or ignoring our emotional experiences, the other half inevitably finds alternative methods to convey its message. This phenomenon represents one of the most fundamental yet frequently misunderstood aspects of human health and wellness. Consider for a moment the intricate architecture of human consciousness. We are simultaneously thinking beings and feeling beings, creatures of logic and creatures of emotion. Throughout our development from childhood into adulthood, many of us internalize messages about emotional expression that may not serve our well-being. Perhaps we learned that displaying certain feelings was inappropriate, that vulnerability equated to weakness, that maintaining a stoic exterior was necessary for survival in our particular family system or cultural context. These early lessons, possibly adaptive at the time, can establish patterns that persist long after they cease to benefit us. Practice of emotional suppression often begins innocuously enough. A challenging day at work prompts us to push aside frustration rather than acknowledging it. Personal disappointment leads us to distract ourselves rather than processing the sadness. A moment of anxiety gets dismissed as irrational rather than explored with curiosity. Each individual instance might seem inconsequential, merely a practical response to life's endless demands. After all, we cannot pause to examine every feeling that arises throughout our busy days. When these isolated incidents accumulate into a consistent pattern, suppression becomes our default response to emotional discomfort. The consequences begin manifesting in unexpected ways. Your physical body possesses remarkable intelligence, operating systems that have evolved over millennia to maintain equilibrium and signal when something requires attention. When emotional material remains unprocessed, your body registers this as a form of stress, activating physiological responses designed for short-term crisis management. These responses include the release of various hormones and neurotransmitters, shifts in blood flow, changes in muscle tension, and alterations in immune function. While these mechanisms serve us well during genuine emergencies, their chronic activation due to persistent emotional suppression gradually erodes our physical well-being. Let us explore the myriad ways this process unfolds, examining how the invisible realm of feelings translates into tangible physical experiences. Understanding these connections empowers us to interpret our bodily signals more accurately and respond with greater wisdom and compassion toward ourselves. Persistent physical discomfort often serves as the body's primary language when emotional processing has been interrupted. Many individuals notice recurring sensations of tightness, soreness, or pain that seem to lack clear mechanical explanations. You might observe tension gathering in your shoulders, creating a persistent ache that massage provides only temporary relief for. Perhaps your jaw feels perpetually clenched, or your neck carries a stiffness that no amount of stretching seems to resolve completely. People experience frequent headaches that begin as a dull pressure and gradually intensify, particularly during periods of heightened stress. Others notice gastrointestinal distress, cramping, bloating, general digestive upset, despite maintaining relatively consistent eating patterns. These physical manifestations are not imaginary, nor are they signs of personal weakness. Rather, they represent your body's attempt to communicate something important about your internal state. The nervous system, when repeatedly exposed to emotional stress without adequate discharge or resolution, maintains elevated levels of activation. This sustained tension eventually localizes in specific areas of the body, creating the aches and discomforts that seem to appear without explanation. Different individuals tend to carry tension in different locations, some in their backs, others in their heads, others in their digestive systems, often related to personal history, genetic predisposition, and learned patterns. The connection between emotional suppression and compromised immune function represents another crucial aspect of this mind-body relationship. Have you noticed periods when you seem to catch every passing illness, when colds and minor infections arrive in frustrating succession despite your best preventive efforts? Various factors influence immune system effectiveness, including nutrition, sleep quality, and exposure to pathogens. Emotional well-being plays a significant role that is often underestimated. Research in the field of psychoneuroimmunology has illuminated the intricate connections between psychological states and immune system function. When we experience ongoing emotional stress, particularly when feelings remain unacknowledged or unprocessed, our bodies maintain elevated production of stress hormones. These biochemical messengers, while useful in acute situations, exert immunosuppressive effects when chronically elevated. Essentially, the same systems designed to help us respond to immediate threats inadvertently compromise our ability to defend against infectious agents when activated continuously. Your body, preoccupied with managing the internal turmoil of suppressed emotions, has fewer resources available for the routine maintenance tasks that keep pathogens at bay. This dynamic creates a frustrating cycle. You notice increased susceptibility to illness, which adds practical stress to your life through missed work, disrupted plans, and the discomfort of being unwell. This additional stress, combined with the original emotional material that remains unprocessed, further taxes your system. Without intervention, this pattern can persist for extended periods, leaving you puzzled about why your health seems so fragile despite your efforts to maintain it through conventional means. Energy depletion represents perhaps one of the most commonly reported yet least understood consequences of emotional suppression. Many people describe feeling perpetually exhausted, experiencing a bone-deep weariness that adequate sleep fails to remedy. You might wake after 8 hours of rest feeling as though you barely slept at all. Simple tasks require disproportionate effort. Concentration wavers, motivation wanes, This particular brand of fatigue differs qualitatively from the tiredness following physical exertion or a late night. It carries a heavier, more pervasive quality that can be difficult to articulate. This phenomenon occurs because emotional processing, even when occurring outside conscious awareness, demands considerable energy. When feelings arise, your psychological apparatus must do something with them. If you consciously acknowledge and work through emotions, this processing happens relatively efficiently. However, when you suppress feelings, pushing them away from awareness, your psyche must continuously expend energy to maintain that suppression. It's analogous to holding a beach ball underwater. Possible, but requiring constant effort that drains your resources. Furthermore, unresolved emotional material often manifests as intrusive thoughts, vague anxiety, background rumination that occupies mental bandwidth even when you're nominally focused on other activities. This divided attention creates cognitive fatigue, leaving you depleted despite not having engaged in obviously taxing mental or physical work. You might notice that weekends, which should provide restoration, fail to leave you feeling refreshed. Vacations, rather than energizing you, reveal the depth of your exhaustion. This persistent depletion frequently puzzles those experiencing it, particularly when standard medical evaluations reveal no apparent physical cause. Sleep disturbances frequently accompany emotional suppression, creating another avenue through which buried feelings impact physical well-being. Perhaps you find yourself lying awake long after retiring for the evening, your mind circling through concerns, replaying conversations, generating anxious predictions about future events. Maybe you fall asleep readily enough, but wake in the small hours of the morning, unable to return to rest. Some individuals experience sleep that feels frustratingly light and unrefreshing, never quite reaching the deeper stages necessary for true restoration. The relationship between emotional states and sleep quality operates through multiple mechanisms. Unprocessed feelings create physiological activation, elevated heart rate, increased muscle tension, racing thoughts that interferes with the parasympathetic dominance necessary for quality sleep. Additionally, the nighttime hours, with their quiet and lack of external stimulation, often allow suppressed emotional content to surface more readily. Without the distractions of daily activity, the feelings you've pushed aside during waking hours press for attention, manifesting as racing thoughts or heightened anxiety that prevents restful sleep. This sleep disruption, in turn, amplifies all the other consequences we've discussed. Poor sleep impairs immune function, heightens pain sensitivity, exacerbates mood difficulties, and depletes energy reserves. It creates a particularly vicious cycle wherein emotional suppression disturbs sleep, and inadequate sleep reduces your capacity to process emotions effectively, leading to further suppression and continued sleep problems. Breaking this pattern requires addressing the underlying emotional dynamics rather than simply targeting the sleep symptoms in isolation. Changes in eating patterns provide another window into the impact of suppressed emotions on physical well-being. Food represents one of the most readily available sources of comfort and pleasure in daily life, and many people unconsciously turn to eating as a means of managing difficult feelings. You might notice yourself reaching for snacks despite not feeling physically hungry, particularly during moments of stress, boredom, or emotional discomfort. Perhaps you find yourself eating past the point of comfortable fullness, using food to create a sensation of numbness or temporary satisfaction that displaces other feelings. Conversely, individuals experience suppressed appetite when dealing with unprocessed emotions. Food loses its appeal. The act of eating feels burdensome. Weight loss occurs despite no conscious effort to restrict intake. Whether manifesting as increased or decreased consumption, these alterations in eating behavior reflect your body's attempt to cope with emotional material that hasn't been adequately processed through other channels. Beyond the behavioral changes, emotional stress directly impacts digestive function through the gut-brain axis. Your gastrointestinal system contains an extensive network of neurons that communicate bidirectionally with your central nervous system. Emotional states influence gut motility, enzyme production, and the composition of your intestinal microbiome. Chronic emotional depression can manifest as irritable bowel syndrome, chronic constipation or diarrhea, acid reflux, general digestive discomfort. These symptoms, while genuinely physical, often resist purely pharmaceutical interventions because their roots lie partially in the emotional realm. Your skin, that largest organ forming the boundary between your inner and outer worlds, frequently reflects your emotional state in visible ways. Have you noticed breakouts appearing during particularly stressful periods? Perhaps chronic skin conditions like eczema, psoriasis, or rosacea flare when you're dealing with significant emotional challenges. People develop hives or rashes in response to psychological stress, while others notice their skin appearing dull, tired, aged beyond what seems proportional to time passing. Mechanisms connecting emotional states to skin health involve both direct and indirect pathways. Stress hormones influence inflammatory processes throughout the body, including in the skin. They affect oil production, healing rates, the skin's barrier function. Additionally, emotional suppression often correlates with self-care deficits, inadequate hydration, poor sleep, nutritional compromises that further impact skin quality. Individuals unconsciously pick at their skin or engage in other behaviors that provide momentary relief from emotional tension, but damage skin integrity. Cognitive difficulties represent another significant consequence of emotional suppression that people frequently fail to connect to their emotional state. You might notice increased forgetfulness, repeatedly misplacing items or forgetting appointments. Concentration becomes elusive with your attention skittering away from tasks despite your best efforts to focus. Learning new information feels more challenging than it once did. You might read a paragraph multiple times without retaining its content. Find yourself spacing out during conversations despite genuine interest in the topic. These cognitive impacts occur because emotional processing and cognitive function draw from overlapping neurological resources. When significant mental energy is devoted to suppressing feelings, less remains available for other cognitive tasks. Additionally, the physiological arousal associated with unprocessed emotions, elevated stress hormones, disrupted sleep, systemic inflammation, directly impairs brain function. The hippocampus, crucial for memory formation, is particularly vulnerable to the effects of chronic stress. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive functions like planning, decision-making, and impulse control, also suffers under conditions of sustained emotional strain. Understanding why emotional suppression exerts such profound physical effects requires exploring the fundamental unity of mind and body. Despite our cultural tendency to conceptualize these as separate entities, they represent different aspects of a single integrated system. Your thoughts influence your biochemistry. Your biochemistry influences your thoughts. Your emotions shape your physical state. Your physical state shapes your emotions. This bidirectional influence operates continuously, largely beneath conscious awareness. When an emotion arises, it involves coordinated activity across multiple systems. Your brain processes the stimulus that triggered the feeling. Neural networks activate, generating the subjective experience of emotion. Simultaneously, endocrine system releases various hormones that prepare your body for appropriate action. Your cardiovascular system adjusts heart rate and blood pressure. Your respiratory pattern changes. Your muscles tense or relax. Your immune system modulates its activity. This whole body response evolved to support adaptive behavior, fighting, fleeing, connecting, braiding, grieving, or whatever action the situation requires. Emotional suppression essentially interrupts this natural cycle. The initial phases occur normally. The trigger arises, the neural and hormonal cascades begin. But the completion of the cycle gets blocked. Rather than allowing the emotion to run its course, which would eventually return your system to baseline, suppression maintains you in a state of partial activation. It's akin to repeatedly starting a sneeze, but never letting it happen, or beginning a yawn without completing it. The tension created by this incomplete process accumulates over time. The stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, play particularly important roles in this dynamic. In acute situations, their release provides crucial benefits: enhanced focus, increased energy, improved short-term memory, heightened pain tolerance. These adaptations help us respond effectively to genuine threats or challenges. However, our stress response system evolved to handle intermittent activation followed by recovery periods. Chronic elevation of stress hormones, as occurs with persistent emotional suppression, produces very different effects. Prolonged cortisol exposure suppresses immune function, promotes fat storage, particularly in the abdominal region, interferes with blood sugar regulation, disrupts sleep architecture, impairs memory consolidation, increases blood pressure, and contributes to inflammatory processes throughout the body. Chronic adrenaline elevation maintains the body in a state of heightened alertness that feels anxious and draining, contributes to muscle tension, and can lead to cardiac strain over time. These biochemical changes underlie many of the physical symptoms we've discussed. Additionally, emotional suppression often involves muscular tension as a physical component of holding in feelings. You might unconsciously tighten your jaw when angry, restrict your breathing when anxious, or hold your shoulders high and tight when stressed. These muscular patterns, when maintained chronically, create the aches and pains that seem mysterious because we're not consciously creating them. The body quite literally holds unexpressed emotions in its tissues. The immune system's responsiveness to psychological states deserves particular attention given its significance for overall health. Your immune cells possess receptors for stress hormones and neurotransmitters, allowing direct communication between your nervous system and immune function. This connection evolved to allow adaptive shifts in immune priorities. During acute danger, immediate survival takes precedence over long-term immunity. System temporarily downregulates certain immune functions to conserve energy for immediate needs. However, when emotional stress becomes chronic due to persistent suppression, this temporary downregulation extends indefinitely. Immune cells, called natural killer cells, which play crucial roles in tumor surveillance and defense against viral infections, decrease in number and activity. Inflammatory markers increase, promoting chronic low-grade inflammation that contributes to numerous health problems, including cardiovascular disease, diabetes, autoimmune conditions, and neurodegenerative disorders. Wound healing slows. Antibody production in response to vaccines may be diminished. Intricate balance of the immune system evolved over millennia to protect us effectively becomes dysregulated. Perhaps most concerning is that these effects can persist even after the triggering stressor has passed. The body can become habituated to a state of stress, maintaining elevated activation even when circumstances improve. This phenomenon helps explain why some people experience health problems that seem disproportionate to their current life circumstances. The body continues responding to old, unresolved emotional material as though it were present moment threat. So, what can you do when you recognize these patterns in your own life? How do you begin reversing a cycle that may have been operating for years or even decades? The journey toward emotional and physical wellness requires patience, self-compassion, and often support from others, but it is absolutely possible regardless of how entrenched the patterns may seem. The first and perhaps most crucial step involves developing awareness of your emotional landscape. Many people who habitually suppress feelings have become so practiced at it that they genuinely don't recognize their own emotions as they arise. You might experience physical sensations, a tight chest, a lump in your throat, a fluttery stomach, without connecting these to specific feelings. You might notice only the most intense emotions while remaining oblivious to subtler ones. Building emotional awareness means learning to pause periodically and check in with yourself, asking what you're feeling in the present moment. This practice need not be complicated. Throughout your day, you might set periodic reminders to stop for 30 seconds and simply notice what's happening internally. Sensations are present in your body. What thoughts are moving through your mind? Can you identify any emotions? Initially, you might draw blanks or notice only vague states like good or bad. With continued practice, your emotional vocabulary typically expands, hence allowing you to distinguish among the rich variety of human feelings: frustration, disappointment, anxiety, excitement, contentment, loneliness, irritation, joy, grief, and countless others. As awareness develops, you can begin exploring where these feelings reside in your body. Different emotions often manifest with characteristic physical signatures. Anger might appear as heat in your chest or tension in your jaw. Sadness might create heaviness in your chest or a lump in your throat. Anxiety might manifest as butterflies in your stomach or tightness in your shoulders. Fear might produce a sensation of hollowness or shakiness. By learning your personal emotional geography, you become better equipped to recognize feelings as they emerge, creating opportunity for conscious processing rather than automatic suppression. Finding appropriate outlets for emotional expression represents the next crucial element. Are fundamentally expressive creatures. We evolved to communicate our internal states through facial expressions, body language, vocalizations, and eventually language. Suppression runs counter to this fundamental nature helps explain why it carries such significant costs. Creating regular opportunities for emotional expression allows the natural cycle to complete, reducing the accumulation of unprocessed material. The specific form of expression matters less than finding approaches that resonate with you personally. Some people find that talking with trusted friends or family members provides necessary release. The simple act of putting feelings into words and having them received with empathy can be remarkably therapeutic. Prefer written expression through journaling, which offers privacy and the opportunity to explore feelings without concern for how they're received. Free writing, where you simply allow whatever wants to emerge onto the page without editing or judgment, can be particularly effective for accessing suppressed material. Creative expression through art, music, dance, other modalities offers another powerful avenue for emotional processing. These approaches can access feelings that exist beneath verbal consciousness, allowing expression of states that resist translation into words. You need not possess artistic talent for these practices to be beneficial. Finger painting, drumming, moving spontaneously to music, molding clay all provide opportunities for nonverbal emotional discharge. Many people find that engaging in creative expression accesses feelings they didn't consciously know they were carrying. Physical movement deserves special mention as a powerful tool for processing emotions and reducing the physiological activation associated with suppression. Exercise offers obvious benefits for stress reduction through multiple mechanisms. It metabolizes stress hormones, promotes endorphin release, improves sleep quality, and enhances overall physical health. However, movement practices that specifically engage the mind-body connection often prove particularly effective for addressing emotional suppression. Yoga, with its combination of physical postures, breathwork, and mindful awareness, helps release stored tension while cultivating present moment consciousness. Many practitioners report unexpected emotional releases during practice, tears arising in a hip opening pose, for instance, or a wave of anger during a strong standing sequence. These responses reflect the release of emotions that had been held in the body's tissues. Practices like Tai Chi, Qigong, or mindful walking integrate physical movement with attention to internal experience, facilitating emotional processing. Even vigorous exercise without explicit mindfulness components can provide emotional benefits. Running, cycling, or other cardiovascular activities offer structured opportunities to move energy through your system. Find that the rhythmic, repetitive nature of such activities creates a meditative state that allows feelings to surface and process naturally. Others appreciate the simple physical outlet for energy that might otherwise manifest as restless tension. Breathing practices offer a surprisingly powerful tool for emotional regulation that can be practiced virtually anywhere. Your breath pattern both reflects and influences your emotional state. Anxiety typically involves rapid, shallow, chest-based breathing. Calm involves slower, deeper, diaphragmatic breathing. By consciously modifying your breathing, you can shift your physiological state in ways that facilitate emotional processing and reduce stress activation. Simple practices like extending your exhalation longer than your inhalation activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Promoting relaxation. Box breathing, where you equalize the length of your inhalation, breath retention, exhalation, and another breath retention creates a meditative rhythm that calms the mind. Alternate nostril breathing, a yogic technique, helps balance the nervous system's activity. These practices require no special equipment or environment. You can practice them sitting at your desk, lying in bed, even during a short break in your day. Progressive muscle relaxation represents another accessible technique for releasing physical tension associated with emotional suppression. This practice involves systematically tensing and then releasing different muscle groups throughout your body, typically starting with your feet and working upward. The deliberate tensing helps you recognize where you're habitually holding tension that you may have stopped consciously noticing. The release phase allows those chronically tight muscles to soften, often creating a profound sense of relaxation and occasionally allowing suppressed emotions to surface. Mindfulness and meditation practices cultivate a particular quality of awareness that proves invaluable for working with emotions. Rather than getting swept away by feelings or reflexively suppressing them, mindfulness teaches you to observe your internal experience with curiosity and acceptance. You learn to notice thoughts and feelings as events in consciousness without necessarily identifying with or acting on them. This creates space around your emotional experience, reducing its overwhelming quality and allowing you to respond more skillfully. Meditation need not involve elaborate techniques or extended time commitments. Even 5 minutes of simply sitting quietly and observing your breath can begin shifting your relationship with your internal experience. Many practitioners find that regular meditation increases their emotional awareness, reduces reactive suppression, and builds capacity to tolerate uncomfortable feelings without becoming overwhelmed by them. Various forms exist: focused attention practices, open monitoring practices, body scan practices, kindness practices, each offering distinct benefits and appealing to different temperaments. Working with a mental health professional often proves invaluable, particularly when emotional suppression patterns are deeply entrenched or when you're dealing with significant trauma. Therapists trained in various modalities can help you identify patterns you can't see yourself, provide safe space for exploring difficult feelings, teach specific skills for emotional regulation and expression, offer the empathic presence that facilitates healing. Various therapeutic approaches address mind-body connections, including somatic experiencing, sensorimotor psychotherapy, EMDR, and others specifically designed to work with how emotions manifest physically. Even without diagnosable mental health conditions, many people benefit from periodic therapeutic support, particularly during life transitions or challenging periods. Therapy isn't remedial. It's an investment in your well-being and personal development. Finding a good therapeutic fit sometimes requires trying multiple providers, but the effort typically proves worthwhile. Many therapists now offer virtual sessions, increasing accessibility for those with scheduling challenges or geographic limitations. Developing self-compassion represents perhaps the most transformative element of healing from emotional suppression. Many of us learned to suppress feelings in the first place because we internalized messages that certain emotions were unacceptable, that we were too sensitive, or that our feelings burdened others. These early lessons often came packaged with criticism and shame. Reversing these patterns requires actively cultivating a different relationship with yourself, one characterized by kindness, understanding, patience, Self-compassion involves treating yourself with the same warmth and support you'd offer a dear friend facing similar struggles. When you notice you've been suppressing feelings rather than adding self-criticism to the existing difficulty, you might acknowledge the challenge with understanding. You might recognize that suppression often developed as a protective strategy that served you at an earlier time, even if it no longer serves you well. You might speak to yourself with gentle encouragement rather than harsh judgment. Research consistently demonstrates that self-compassion, far from leading to self-indulgence or lack of motivation as some fear, actually enhances resilience, emotional well-being, and even physical health. People who relate to themselves with greater compassion show better stress hormone profiles, enhanced immune function, and improved overall health behaviors. They're also more likely to persist with beneficial changes because the process isn't driven by harsh self-criticism that eventually becomes exhausting and unsustainable. Building a lifestyle that supports emotional well-being requires attention to several fundamental pillars of health. Quality sleep stands as perhaps the most critical factor given its bidirectional relationship with emotional processing. Prioritizing consistent sleep and wake times, creating a restful environment, limiting screen exposure before bed, practicing good sleep hygiene all contribute to better rest, which in turn enhances your capacity to process emotions effectively during waking hours. Nutrition influences emotional well-being through multiple pathways beyond the eating behavior changes we discussed earlier. Your gut produces significant quantities of neurotransmitters, including approximately 90% of your body's serotonin. The composition of your gut microbiome, influenced by dietary choices, affects both physical health and mood regulation. No single diet proves optimal for everyone. Most people benefit from emphasizing whole foods, adequate protein, healthy fats, vegetables, while limiting heavily processed foods, excessive sugar, and alcohol, particularly given alcohol's tendency to suppress emotional processing despite its short-term anxiolytic effects. Social connection represents another crucial element often overlooked in discussions of health. Humans evolved as deeply social creatures, and our nervous systems literally regulate one another through connection. Quality relationships provide opportunities for emotional expression, perspective, taking support during difficulties, and the simple comfort of being known and accepted. Isolation, conversely, exacerbates stress and often reinforces patterns of emotional suppression. Investing time and energy in nurturing supportive relationships pays dividends for both emotional and physical well-being. Nature exposure offers benefits that may seem surprising given our technology-focused culture. Time spent in natural environments consistently demonstrates stress reducing effects, lowering cortisol levels, reducing blood pressure, improving mood, and enhancing immune function. Even brief nature exposure, a 15-minute walk in a park, sitting under a tree, tending a small garden, can shift your physiological state in beneficial directions. For many people, natural settings also facilitate emotional processing, perhaps because they provide gentle sensory engagement without the demands of social interaction or the stimulation of urban environments. And leisure activities deserve intentional inclusion in your life rather than being relegated to whatever time remains after obligations are met. Engaging in activities purely for enjoyment and interest without productivity goals provides psychological restoration and often creates space for emotional processing. Whether reading fiction, engaging in hobbies, playing games, simply spending unstructured time according to your inclinations, these experiences contribute meaningfully to well-being despite our culture's tendency to devalue them as frivolous. Recognizing that healing from patterns of emotional suppression occurs gradually rather than overnight helps maintain realistic expectations. You've likely been developing these patterns for years or decades. They won't reverse in a week or month. Progress typically occurs non-linearly, with improvements interspersed with setbacks. During difficult periods, you might find yourself reverting to old suppression habits even after you'd believed you'd moved beyond them. Represents normal human variability rather than failure. Self-compassion, again, proves crucial during these moments. You might notice that as you begin allowing previously suppressed emotions to surface, you temporarily feel worse before feeling better. Emotions you've been pushing down may emerge with surprising intensity. You might experience waves of sadness, anger, anxiety that feel overwhelming. This represents the proverbial getting worse before getting better phenomenon and typically indicates that the work is actually progressing. The feelings were always present, simply hidden from view. Bringing them into consciousness allows them to finally be processed and released, but the transition period can feel challenging. During this phase, additional support often proves valuable. Intensifying your self-care practices, leaning more heavily on your support system, temporarily increasing therapy frequency can help you navigate the intensity without becoming overwhelmed or reverting completely to suppression. Remembering that difficult emotions, while uncomfortable, aren't dangerous helps maintain your willingness to feel them. Feelings pass typically more quickly than we expect when we allow them to flow rather than resisting them. As you progress in this journey, you'll likely notice subtle shifts that signal improvement. Physical symptoms that had become so familiar you'd almost stop noticing them begin easing. Perhaps those chronic headaches decrease in frequency or intensity. Maybe your digestion improves. Your sleep might become more restful. Energy levels gradually increase. The frequency of minor illnesses decreases. These physical improvements often precede conscious recognition of emotional shifts, offering tangible evidence that your efforts are bearing fruit. You might also notice changes in your relationships. As you become more comfortable with your own emotional experience, you typically develop greater capacity for emotional presence with others. Conversations deepen, conflicts feel less threatening, intimacy increases. People may comment that you seem different, more present, more authentic. These relational shifts emerge naturally from your changing relationship with yourself. Your relationship with your body often transforms as well. Rather than viewing physical symptoms as inconvenient problems to suppress or override, you might begin experiencing them as valuable information about your internal state. Tension in your shoulders becomes a signal to check in with yourself about stress, rather than merely a reason to schedule a massage. Butterfly sensation in your stomach prompts exploration of what's making you anxious rather than being dismissed as meaningless. Your body becomes an ally in self-understanding rather than an adversary generating inexplicable complaints. This shift toward embodiment, living more fully in your body rather than primarily in your head, often produces surprising benefits. Many people report enhanced pleasure and engagement with physical experiences. Food tastes richer. Physical affection feels more satisfying. Movement becomes more enjoyable. Sexual experiences deepen. These improvements emerge because suppressing emotions requires a kind of generalized numbing. You can't selectively numb only uncomfortable feelings without also diminishing pleasant ones. As you reopen to the full spectrum of emotional experience, your capacity for positive feelings expands along with your willingness to feel difficult ones. Your thinking patterns may shift as cognitive resources previously devoted to suppression become available for other purposes. Mental fog lifts, concentration improves, memory becomes more reliable, decision making feels less overwhelming, creative thinking flows more readily. You might notice increased mental flexibility and openness to new perspectives. These cognitive improvements can significantly enhance both work performance and personal satisfaction. Perhaps most significantly, you may develop a different sense of yourself. Many people who've habitually suppressed emotions describe feeling cut off from themselves, uncertain about who they really are beneath the roles they perform. As you reconnect with your emotional experience, a clearer sense of authentic selfhood often emerges. You become better acquainted with your values, preferences, boundaries, and desires. This self-knowledge enables more aligned decision-making, choices that genuinely reflect who you are rather than who you think you should be or what others expect. This isn't to suggest that life becomes perpetually easy or that emotional challenges disappear entirely. Difficult feelings remain part of human experience. Loss still brings grief. Injustice still provokes anger. Uncertainty still generates anxiety. The difference lies not in the emotions themselves, but in your relationship with them. Rather than viewing feelings as problems requiring suppression, you increasingly experience them as natural responses providing valuable information about your needs and circumstances. You develop greater trust in your ability to navigate emotional experiences without being overwhelmed by them. This trust reduces the need for suppression because you're no longer convinced that allowing feelings will lead to catastrophe. You discover that you can feel quite angry without acting destructively. That profound sadness passes rather than persisting indefinitely. Anxiety provides useful information despite its discomfort. This experiential knowledge, accumulated through repeated instances of feeling and surviving various emotions, builds genuine emotional resilience. Not the brittle, effortful variety based on suppression, but the flexible strength that comes from integration. The ripple effects of this transformation extend beyond your individual experience. Benefit immensely when parents model healthy emotional expression rather than suppression, learning from early age that feelings are manageable and communication is possible. Partners experience greater intimacy and understanding when both people can share their emotional experiences openly. Friendships deepen. Work relationships improve. Even casual interactions often carry more genuine warmth when you're more emotionally available and authentic. Some people find that addressing emotional suppression catalyzes broader life changes. Perhaps you recognize that certain relationships or situations persistently generate difficult feelings that you've been suppressing, prompting reconsideration of those commitments. Maybe you discover that your career path, while externally successful, conflicts with deeper values that your emotional experience reveals. These realizations can feel destabilizing, but often lead to ultimately more satisfying life directions. It's worth acknowledging that modern life presents genuine challenges to emotional wellness that previous generations might not have faced to the same degree. The pace of contemporary existence leaves little space for reflection and processing. Digital technology creates constant stimulation and comparison opportunities that fuel difficult emotions, while simultaneously offering infinite distraction from them. Economic pressures often necessitate work schedules that leave minimal energy for self-care. Social isolation has increased even as virtual connection proliferates. These systemic factors make individual emotional wellness more challenging to achieve and maintain. Recognizing these broader contextual factors doesn't excuse us from attending to our emotional health. It does suggest the value of self-compassion when we struggle. You're not failing if you find emotional wellness challenging. You're navigating genuinely difficult circumstances that would challenge anyone. Some degree of struggle is reasonable and doesn't indicate personal inadequacy. Simultaneously, these systemic challenges make attending to emotional health more important rather than less, as the cumulative effects of suppression compound over time, creating community around these practices, whether through support groups, classes, informal gathering with friends interested in similar growth, often provides crucial support. Commitment to emotional wellness normalizes the challenges inherent in the work while offering opportunities for learning from others' experiences. Many people find that group settings provide accountability and encouragement that sustain their efforts during difficult periods. Various options exist, from structured group therapy to informal wellness circles to online communities, each offering distinct benefits. Throughout this journey, patience with yourself proves essential. There's no finish line where you permanently arrive at perfect emotional health. Rather, this represents an ongoing practice of awareness, expression, and integration that continues throughout life. Some periods will feel easier than others. New challenges will arise requiring the application of your developing skills to novel circumstances. Growth occurs spirally rather than linearly. You may revisit similar issues at deeper levels over time. Celebrating progress, however subtle, helps maintain motivation and counters the tendency to focus exclusively on remaining difficulties. Perhaps you notice you caught yourself suppressing a feeling earlier in the process than you would have previously. Maybe you chose to express something you would typically have kept inside. Perhaps you experienced a difficult emotion without it completely overwhelming your day. These seemingly small shifts represent genuine progress worth acknowledging. Your physical body, remarkable organism that has been sending you signals about suppressed emotions, will likely become an important ally in this ongoing process. As you develop greater attunement to physical sensations and their emotional meanings, you gain an early warning system for emotional suppression. Familiar tension pattern might prompt you to pause and check in with yourself before the suppression becomes entrenched. Physical symptoms that once seemed mysterious become understandable as communication from your integrated mind-body system. This doesn't mean that all physical symptoms have purely emotional origins or that addressing emotional suppression will cure every ailment. Physical health is multifaceted, influenced by genetics, environmental exposures, infectious agents, injuries, and countless other factors. However, emotional well-being represents one significant thread in the complex tapestry of health, important enough that ignoring it typically extracts a cost. Attending to it usually yields meaningful benefits. Continue. Some people worry that focusing on emotional experience will make them overly self-absorbed or less effective in their responsive abilities. Clinical and research evidence suggests the opposite typically occurs. People who process emotions effectively rather than suppressing them generally function better across life domains. Clearer decisions because they're not clouded by unacknowledged feelings. They maintain more stable energy because they're not depleting themselves through suppression. They navigate relationships more skillfully because they understand their own emotional landscape and can communicate about it. They experience greater life satisfaction because they're more aligned with their authentic values and preferences. There's wisdom in the ancient insight that has appeared across cultures and traditions, that wholeness and health require integrating all aspects of ourselves, including the emotional experiences we might prefer to avoid. Modern neuroscience and psychoneuroimmunology increasingly validate what contemplative traditions have long taught, that mind and body represent a unified system, that suppressing one aspect affects the whole, and that integration facilitates well-being. Your emotions, even the uncomfortable ones, carry important information. Anger signals boundary violations and prompts protective action. Fear alerts you to potential threats. Sadness marks loss and facilitates necessary grieving. Guilt indicates value violations and motivates repair. Anxiety highlights uncertainty and promotes planning. These feelings evolved because they serve adaptive functions. Suppressing them doesn't eliminate the situations that triggered them. It simply blinds you to important information about your circumstances and needs. Learning to work with rather than against your emotional nature represents a fundamental shift that influences virtually every aspect of life. It doesn't require becoming emotionally indulgent or losing sight of practical responsibilities. Rather, it involves recognizing that your emotional experience provides valuable data that, when acknowledged and processed appropriately, actually enhances your functioning and well-being. The path forward from chronic emotional suppression isn't always comfortable, typically proves worthwhile. As physical symptoms ease, energy returns, sleep improves, immunity strengthens, cognitive clarity sharpens, you'll likely find yourself feeling more vitally alive, perpetually happy. That's neither realistic nor necessary, but more genuinely present to the full spectrum of human experience. With all its richness, complexity, and meaning, your body has been trying to tell you something through those mysterious aches, that persistent fatigue, those recurring illnesses. It's been signaling that something important requires attention, that feelings need acknowledgement, that wholeness necessitates integration. Listening to these signals, responding with curiosity and compassion rather than frustration and suppression opens pathways toward authentic wellness that address root causes rather than merely managing symptoms. This journey belongs uniquely to you, shaped by your particular history, temperament, circumstances, and needs. The specific practices and approaches that prove most helpful will vary. What remains constant is the fundamental principle: honoring your emotional experience rather than suppressing it serves both your psychological and physical well-being. Your feelings are not your enemies to be defeated or problems to be solved. They're part of your humanity, deserving of acknowledgement and expression, guiding you toward greater self-understanding and authentic living. As you move forward, remember that seeking support isn't weakness, but wisdom, whether through friends, family, professionals, community, or various resources. You need not undertake this journey alone. Humans are wired for connection, and healing often occurs most powerfully in the context of relationships where we feel seen, heard, and accepted. Reach out when you need support. Accept help when it's offered. Extend compassion to yourself as you navigate the inevitable challenges that arise. You possesses remarkable healing capacity when given appropriate conditions. By addressing emotional suppression, you're not adding yet another task to an already overwhelming list. Rather, you're removing obstacles to the natural healing and regulation that your system wants to accomplish. You're working with your nature rather than against it, facilitating processes that serve your deepest well-being. Your emotions exist as part of your inheritance as a human being evolved over millennia to help you navigate life's complexities. They merit your attention, your curiosity, and your respect. When you offer these gifts to yourself, when you create space for the full range of human feeling, you discover that you're more resilient, more capable, more whole than the suppression patterns suggested. You find that you can feel deeply and live fully, that emotions pass through you without destroying you, that vulnerability and strength can coexist. This understanding transforms not just your health, but your entire relationship with being human. You stop viewing yourself as a mind that occasionally suffers unfortunate physical symptoms and instead recognize yourself as an integrated being where psychological and physical aspects continuously interact. From this more complete perspective, caring for yourself necessarily involves attending to emotional well-being alongside physical health, recognizing these as inseparable dimensions of your total experience. The invitation then is to begin wherever you are with whatever capacity you currently possess. Perhaps today that means simply pausing to notice what you're feeling. Maybe tomorrow you'll share one honest emotion with someone you trust. Perhaps next week you'll try a new practice that creates space for expression. There's no perfect starting point, no ideal level of emotional awareness you must achieve before beginning. You start where you are with what you have, taking one small step and then another. Each time you choose awareness over suppression, expression over hiding, honesty over pretense, you strengthen new neural pathways and weaken old patterns. Each time you treat yourself with compassion, when you stumble, you build the psychological safety necessary for continued growth. Each time you notice and appreciate subtle progress, you reinforce your motivation to continue. Change accumulates through these repeated small choices far more than through dramatic transformations. Your body, that faithful companion carrying you through life, deserves your kindness and attention. It's been doing its best to communicate important information through the only language it knows: physical sensation. By learning to understand this language, by responding to symptoms as messages rather than merely nuisances, you deepen your relationship with yourself and open possibilities for genuine healing that addresses causes rather than merely suppressing effects. The path forward isn't about achieving some idealized state of perpetual ease or eliminating all discomfort from your experience. Rather, developing a more skillful, compassionate, and integrated way of relating to your full experience. The pleasant and unpleasant, the comfortable and challenging, the joyful and sorrowful. It's about reclaiming your wholeness, honoring all aspects of your humanity, creating conditions where genuine wellness can flourish. This represents sacred work, not in any religious sense necessarily, in the profound sense of attending to what matters most, your well-being, your authenticity, your capacity to live fully and meaningfully. It deserves your time, your effort, and your patience. The investment you make in understanding and expressing your emotional experience returns dividends that extend far beyond symptom reduction, touching virtually every dimension of your life and relationships. As you continue forward, trust that you possess innate wisdom about your own needs and experiences. External guidance and support can be invaluable. Ultimately, you remain the foremost expert on your internal landscape. Your feelings, your bodily sensations, your intuitions all provide important information that complements but isn't replaced by external advice. Learning to trust yourself, listen to your inner experience with curiosity rather than judgment, represents a crucial aspect of this journey. There will be difficult days when old patterns resurface strongly, when suppression feels easier than expression, when you question whether this work is worthwhile. These moments don't indicate failure. They're natural fluctuations in any growth process. During these times, return to whatever grounds you, whether that's a particular practice, a supportive relationship, or simply the knowledge that challenges pass. Continue placing one foot in front of the other, trusting that even imperfect efforts move you forward. Your emotional landscape, like any landscape, contains varied terrain, meadows and mountains, gentle slopes and steep cliffs, sunshine and storms. Learning to navigate this terrain skillfully, to travel through it rather than trying to eliminate features you find difficult, develops your capacity for living fully across all life circumstances. You become less at the mercy of your feelings, even as you become more willing to feel them, developing the emotional flexibility that represents genuine maturity. The physical symptoms that brought you to this understanding, uncomfortable, have served an important purpose in alerting you that something needed attention. Rather than viewing them as problems or failures of your body, you might recognize them as a somewhat clumsy, but ultimately helpful communication system trying to guide you toward greater wellness. Your body's wisdom, even when it manifests as pain or discomfort, ultimately serves your well-being when you learn to interpret and respond appropriately to its messages. As healing progresses, you may find that your relationship with discomfort itself transforms. Rather than immediately trying to eliminate every unpleasant sensation or feeling, you develop capacity to be present with discomfort, explore it with curiosity to understand what it's communicating. This doesn't mean you never take action to address legitimate problems. Rather, you become more discerning about when action serves you and when simply being present with experience is sufficient. This journey toward emotional and physical integration isn't separate from the rest of your life. It is your life, the ongoing process of becoming more fully yourself, of living with greater awareness and authenticity, of honoring the remarkable integrated system that you are. Every moment offers an opportunity to choose awareness over automaticity, expression over suppression, self-compassion over self-criticism. These choices, accumulated over time, create a life characterized by greater ease, vitality, and meaning. The world needs people who are willing to feel, to be authentic, show up as whole integrated beings rather than fragmented selves presenting acceptable facades while hiding their humanity. Doing this work for yourself, you contribute to creating cultural space for others to do the same. Your willingness to honor your emotional experience gives permission to those around you to honor theirs. Healing thus becomes not merely personal, but relational and even cultural. Whatever your starting point, wherever you currently find yourself on this journey, know that change is possible. The patterns that have contributed to physical symptoms aren't permanent fixtures of your character. They're learned responses that can be unlearned and replaced with more adaptive approaches. Your body's healing capacity, your emotional resilience, your potential for growth, these remain available regardless of how long suppression patterns have operated. Begin today. Begin now. Begin with whatever small step feels accessible. Notice one feeling. Share one honest response. Practice 1 minute of mindful breathing. Take one walk in nature. Write one journal entry. Reach out to one supportive person. Every journey begins with a single step, and every step, however small, moves you toward the integrated wellness that is your birthright as a human being. Your emotions are not the enemy. Your body is not broken. You are not flawed for struggling with suppression. You're human, navigating complex circumstances as best you know how. By bringing curiosity, compassion, courage to this exploration of your emotional landscape, honor yourself fully, and create conditions for authentic healing that transforms not just symptoms, but your entire experience of being alive.